Hello and welcome back to Cinema 104, Film History. So, we're now moving in further into the 60s, and I threw up an image from Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which covers the late 60s into the 70s in Los Angeles. This is the period we're moving into, and actually that film kind of addresses some of the issues as the main character is kind of washed up. He's kind of an old Hollywood star now, and he's trying to make his way in the new Hollywood. Well, that's the era that we're coming into. It's the end of the 60s. There's a lot of political strife. The Vietnam War is a huge issue. There's civil rights assassinations, Malcolm X, MLK. And of course, we have the space race, when the ending in the final landing on the moon. In Hollywood, the studio system is done, and it's completely crumbled. A lot of studios get sold off; they get bought up by large conglomerates, kind of like what we see today. So it's not just a movie studio; it's kind of part of a media empire. Some of these folks don't care as much about making films, so a lot of studio backlots get sold off. Now, simultaneously, when that aspect of the film industry is dying off, another aspect is rising up. That's the youth and a lot of auteurs, a lot of younger auteur directors. You've got some coming from television and theater, but you've also got a lot of folks who grew up or were exposed to foreign films in the 60s, coming from the French New Wave and other places. They've got a new attitude and a new style that they're bringing to Hollywood. And what they're doing is reviving the industry. Next week, they'll take completely over. But this week, we have three auteurs who created revisionist films that re-examined old Hollywood genres. So we have the gangster heist film, we have a romance film, The Graduate, and we also have a sci-fi film, 2001. And each of those sort of revolutionized or revitalized, revised their genre. That's revisionism. We see that a lot with auteurs. So we'll learn what an auteur is: essentially an artist, an author of the film. So the director not just being someone who is a part of the crew and does a job, a significant portion of the work, but someone who actually expresses their own personal thoughts through the film. And this becomes the dominant way of thinking about film and thinking about film directors pretty much from the late 60s on. Still exists to today. That's why Quentin Tarantino films will often be billed as Tarantino's next film, whatever the title or whoever's starring in it, because the director becomes just as important. People try to look for their film. So we see that with Mike Nichols, we see that with Arthur Penn, and we most especially see that with Kubrick's 2001. So, a quick word on that. 2001 revolutionizes sci-fi. Essentially, the first modern sci-fi film. It does for sci-fi what um, Psycho did last week for horror. I want you to take note of The Graduate. Very much of its time. Let's remember we have lots and lots of baby boomers now in college. Okay, you have this huge generation. You have the hippie movement springing up in the mid 60s. And The Graduate, to some extent, reflects all of this. It's a coming of age film for someone who's just as confused as the college students of the time of what to do. Gender roles are changing, society's changing. So The Graduate captures all that really well. And then, of course, first up, we have Bonnie and Clyde, which was the first film that really broke through. It's a little bit before The Graduate and made a ton of money. And it really drew in the young audiences with its rebellious attitude, its sex, and its violence. Okay. And it really, it really broke a lot of rules with the way it was made. And speaking of rules, the Hayes Production Code is dropped in 1966, which means basically you can put whatever you want in the film. Okay, 1968, the MPAA rating system comes along and says, okay, we're going to give different ratings to films and so on and so forth. But essentially, we begin to see filmmakers experiment with violence and sexuality in ways that they haven't before. So, three really great films, very important to film history, and great films on their own right. Hope you enjoy them. Reach out with any questions, and we'll see you next week.